Hello and welcome to the Naval Ammo Guide for War Thunder. In this video, I'll go over every naval shell in the game with detailed explanations, visual guides, and knowledge on where, how, and why to use every shell. Without any further ado, let's get into it. There are two main types of naval weaponry, small caliber secondary weapons and large caliber guns. We'll be focusing on the large caliber guns in this video. I've already talked about the small caliber rounds in my plain ammunition guide, so if you want to learn more about those, click on the info card. Large caliber naval ammo can be split up into three groups: high explosive, semi-armor piercing, and armor piercing. We'll start off with the high explosive group. As the name suggests, these shells are packed with explosive filler. The HE shell is the most basic form of a high explosive shell. When it comes in contact with a target, it blows up. The HE shell usually has the most explosive filler compared to all the other shells, so it deals the most damage to the enemy. Its downside, however, is that it can't penetrate any armor. HE is good against soft targets like PT bows and sub chasers, but against heavier targets, you'll need something like a high explosive base fuse shell. The HEBF shell has one key difference when compared to HE. Its detonator is at the back of the shell instead of the tip, which means HEBF can actually penetrate a bit of armor before detonating. While it does give you penetration, the base fuse shell might lack an explosive filler when compared to the standard HE shell. To see which one you should use, check the stat card. If the filler is significantly less than regular HE, stick with high explosive. If it has slightly less or the same amount of filler, switch over to HEBF. For your anti-air cannons, however, the next two shells will be a lot more useful. The high explosive time fuse shell travels a set amount of time and then explodes, which results in shrapnel flying all around the place. The time is set by the crew and is not 100% accurate. The high explosive variable time fuse shell, on the other hand, uses a magnetic detonator. When it detects an enemy near it, it blows up. The HEVT shell is a lot more accurate than the HETF shell, since it doesn't rely on distance or time. While HETF is decent, it's best to switch over to HEVT whenever you can. Next up are the semi-armor piercing shells. SAP, also known as common on American ships, are a sort of mix between high explosive and armor piercing shells. Compared to high explosive, the body material is thicker, and compared to armor piercing, the amount of explosive filler is higher. This results in a decent jack-of-all-trades type of shell, capable of penetrating armor while still having a good amount of explosives. SAP is great against destroyers and lower-tier cruisers. Now let's take a look at some of the variants of SAP. The semi-armor piercing ballistic cap shell is a more aerodynamic SAP shell. The ballistic cap minimizes wind resistance, which increases penetration over long distances. Next up are the common and special common shells. They're pretty much the same as SAP, the common shell having more explosive filler while the special common shell having more penetration. And the last semi-armor piercing shell is the shrapnel shell. Shrapnel shells have a thin outer casing while the inside of the shell is filled with pieces of metal. The shell penetrates a small amount of armor and then it detonates, which sends the pieces of metal all around the place. On paper, it might sound useful, but the shrapnel shell isn't very effective. It can't penetrate much armor and the pieces of metal don't deal too much damage. SAP or high explosives are a much better choice. And finally, we have the armor piercing shells. These shells have high penetrating capabilities but are somewhat lacking in explosive filler. How they work is very simple. When the shell comes in contact with a target, the fuse is delayed until it travels a set distance, which is somewhere around 7 to 15 meters on most shells. After that, the explosives inside go off, causing damage inside the target. APHE shells are good against heavy opponents like high-tier cruisers and battleships. There are three variants of armor piercing shells and they only differ in their caps. The APHE C shell has a nose cone which reduces the chance of bouncing, while the APHE BC shell improves the aerodynamics. They can also be combined to create the APHE CBC shell, which reduces bouncing and is good at long distances. If you want to learn more about these three shells, check out my tank ammo guide, which goes into more detail about the caps. And that what covers the shells. Now, which shell should you use? For lower tiers, pick the shell with the most explosive filler. PT bows and sub chasers lack proper armor, which means you don't have to worry about penetration. Whichever shell deals the most explosive damage is the best. Against mid-tier targets like destroyers and early cruisers, use shells with a good mix of both, like the semi-armor piercing shell and the high explosive base fuse shell. They offer good penetration while still having decent explosive content. And against high-tier battleships and cruisers, APHE is the way to go. Pick the shell with the best penetration and explosive filler, and also keep the caps in mind. APHE CBC is the best, while APHE BC and APHE C are also good. Against air targets, pick high explosive variable time fuse if possible. If not, high explosive time fuse is good enough. And that about covers it. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments. Other than that, thanks for watching and happy April Fools.